Welcome back to the channel, you guys, and this time it's an amphibian video about dart frogs. Dart frogs are something that I've admired for years but never actually had the time, I guess the inclination to actually keep them. But I've got a little dark spot in our living room. Jackie doesn't know this yet, and I thought a little fish tank there like in the bedroom, lighting up a dark corner, living light. And I thought, do you know what, a friend of mine gave me this old, well not old, aquarium. It's 2 foot across, and I thought, no, instead of something fishy, let's have a fully bioactive, naturalistic dart frog enclosure, something I've never done before. So I've done loads of research on YouTube, as you guys do. If you start a new project, keeping a new animal, we tend to sort of binge watch, don't we? Learn loads of stuff at once. In my time, it was reading books and things. Nowadays, certainly for tutorials, YouTube, there's so many experts on there that really know their stuff. So something I've seen lots of people build in their own way, we're now going to build that here. We've got various stuff, and what are we going to have in there? We're not going to have a misting system. We're going to do it by hand. One dart frog enclosure. I can manage to mist that once a day myself. But we're going to have cork bark backdrop. We're going to cover it in a mixture of coir and moss, dried moss. It's got to be dry to stick, because first off we're going to do is we're going to use black expanding foam. We're going to cover the sides we want, which will be the back on one side, so we can view into the enclosure from the front and one side. We're then going to cover that with brown silicone over here, and then the silicone is going to be covered in the substrate, the dry substrate, the coir mixer. We've got, let me turn you around, it's going to be a lot easier, hold on. So we're going to build up a backdrop with cork bark, expanding foam, silicone, and the dry substrate mix. We've got a good array of plants. These aren't going in wholesale, but we're going to take some cuttings off the edges of these. We've got some foreground plants, and we're going to have, obviously, dart frogs. You're going to need that kind of bromeliad, I think, just that little pond full, and that natural pond's got to be in there somewhere. And the substrate is going to be a mixture of coir and moss, similar to the substrate, if you like, we're going to use for the backdrop. Now, if the substrate gets wet, it's bad for the frogs. It's sour, the water sours, if you like, so you need a drainage layer, a false bottom, just like any terrarium. I'm going to try something different. We're going to try a layer of coarse foam and a layer of fine foam on top, instead of the usual clay balls and gravel with a separating membrane. I'm going to try something different. If you're going to use this stuff, expanding foam, I've used that for years in building side of things. Definitely use gloves, definitely use your old clothes. First thing we've got to do, get some window cleaner, clean this glass spotlessly so the adhesive sticks. But this is going to be a build that's not going to be in a day. Now, I do love doing projects that you can do in a day, start to finish, and see your end result. But this is never going to be like that, because we've got foam that's got to go off. We've got to carve the foam. We've then got to add the silicone and the substrate. We've got to let that go off, and then we can start building out and fitting out the enclosure, and you're going to see it all in one video. So I'm going to make a start, and the first thing is to get that even cleaner than it is now. So I'm just doing a dry run of where things go. This is upside down. It certainly is to me, but we're going to go for a cork bark ledge. We're going to have just above the ground that really expands the floor space again for the frogs, low enough for them to get onto. We're going to have a little ledge here that we can fill with some soil and plant. This side is going to be cork barked on, and this back wall as well. So loosely, something like the space against the buttress roots of a rainforest tree. That's the look we're going for. So we're filling up the space with the foam and the fake background, if you like, the coir background. To keep it naturalistic as well, we're incorporating cork bark into that to bring that real bark effect through. Time for the messy bit now. Okay, some top tips. Make sure you've got stuff to clean up with. Make sure you have got more than one of these. Several pairs, you're going to need them. Old clothes, 100%. Make sure this is pond safe. This is a pond safe expanding foam. The black just makes your life so much easier than the usual sort of yellow version when you come to carving and putting your background on. You're going to need some props. You can see in here we've used the other pieces of bark there, literally just to prop up our background, and those pieces are going on this wall, but of course we've got to tip that on its side once that lot's set, probably tomorrow, possibly later on. So do a dry run of where you want to landscape it. Make sure you've got some props to hold stuff up until the foam sets. Equally with the silicone, brown makes it easier because we're going to have a brown background, so you know, if you don't get coverage everywhere, it's not going to show up so much for sure. And again, pond safe, aquarium safe. Make sure 100% this stuff's aquarium safe. Another top tips, as I've already mentioned, work tidy, wear old clothes. Expanding foam, this stuff is the messiest, stickiest stuff you can work with, and if you've never used it before, cover everything that you don't want to ruin, because you will get it everywhere. Loads of these. It is disgustingly sticky stuff. Major top tip, expanding foam expands. Do not apply it to the thickness you want at the end. I don't mean it expands a little bit. Go for 3 or 4 times minimum expansion. You can already see just how much that stuff's growing. If you're old like me and you remember the film The Blob, expanding foam is that animal. So we let this dry, and then we're going to flip it over and start side number 2. Have yourself a working bin, not your kitchen bin, not something you want to ruin. That expanding foam, if it gets on anything, it's ruined. Have yourself a working bin to keep your workspace tidy and keep throwing all your junk into, for sure. Okay, lots to do. Time for me to find something else to do, because at the end of the day, there's no point watching this stuff go off. It's like watching a kettle boil slowed down 1,000 times. So I want to go and do something else. Let me just tell you that I sourced most of this stuff being lazy. I sourced it on Amazon, expanding foam, the foam that I'm going to use as the false bottom, the brown silicone aquarium safe, loads of this stuff. I just lazily went on Amazon. You could probably shop around at other places in shops and save yourself a few quid. It does all add up. It's surprising. Expanding foam, the black pond safe stuff, aquarium safe brown silicone, it's, you know, it's more than a couple of quid nowadays. You know as I do, everything's gone up. It does add up. The plants, Jackie and I went recently on a 150-mile road trip down to Kent to collect a couple of snakes. Hopefully you've seen that video. You know, we went to a nice garden centre. I brought some nice plants. We went to Morrison's, the nearest supermarket, to get some tea. I brought some cheap little, like, £1 plants for the foreground. So I kind of sourced it all super quick because I just wanted to have it all at hand and get on. But you source it where you like, but they're the products you need to use. For the substrate itself, for the actual substrate, the base layer that we're going to grow the plants from, the frogs are going to live on, we're actually using coir, a little bit of coir husk and a little bit of sphagnum moss, dry sphagnum moss, mixed in with coir peat. And we're going to mix that together with a little bit of sand as well to make up our own substrate. And that's it. We're not going to use any compost or anything like that. So it's actually going to start out a very inert substrate. We're going to use a little bit of the plants potting compost around their roots, but it's going to be bioactive, and there's going to be enough nutrients go through that substrate over time to feed those plants for sure. And at the end of the day, I don't need those plants to grow rampantly. These are plants that in a rainforest can grow enormous. We want to keep them small, we want to keep them healthy and vibrant, but they don't need to be growing super fast. We can propagate and cultivate outside the enclosure. This is just a one-off frog enclosure. I haven't got racks and racks or shelves and shelves of dart frogs where propagating the plants and growing them fast is of any benefit to me, really. So that's the way we're going to try this project out, and we'll see how it goes, but stay tuned for the rest of the build. So it's been just over an hour, and we've got a good crust on the foam. Now you can't carve this for 1 to 2 days, or else it's like gooey toffee. Gooey toffee inside. You've got to leave it 24 to 48 hours to really go off. But look, it's crusted over in just an hour and a half or so. These are pretty solid, so we can flip it on its side and crack on with the other side. More than enough rigidity there to allow us to move it. So that's what we're going to do.
Some fruit veg, well, some cucumber.
Oh, brilliant.
For this one, this rocket needs to be used up because it's reduced.
Okay.
I'll leave it in here.
Yeah, can do. Thanks, Bay. Okay, so now just time to let this stuff dry. 1 can in this small enclosure just did it. It ran out just the perfect amount. So anything bigger, make sure you got plenty of cans of expanding foam. And the good thing about this one, it came with a spare nozzle, because as soon as you leave it on the side, the nozzles usually block up. So we've got the basic background there. Stage 1 complete. Stage 2, when it's dry, is to start carving away at that shiny, bubbly looking surface to make it look more natural, and to expose the porous surface of the foam underneath, which will enable our silicone and other stuff to stick on there. And if you're going to paint that stuff, which we're not, you definitely have got to cut away that shiny outer coating that it sets with, because nothing much wants to stick to it at all. For me, although it does look quite natural, I guess if it was the right colour and texture, it's going to look better carved. Okay, do as I do, not as I say. We're going to carve. Do leave it at least 24 hours for the foam to go off, or it will be gooey inside, more than likely. I've had a trial run, it's only been a few hours, it's okay. So for the purposes of me cracking on, we're going to carve. I'll let you watch that, and I'll tell you some more about the next layer. So, serrated knife, steak knife, or very fine serrated fruit knife. Razor blade, scraper for getting in at other bits. Didn't need it, that knife was nice and small. We got in there, so now we've got to tidy up the mess. You're trying to leave the texture of the foam there. You're not trying to just scrape away and leave it all smooth. Cut some texture in, but try not to go too deep, and you'll get the textures from the folds in the foam. And that will look very much like the bark of a tree, or rocks if you're going to go on a rocky theme and paint it all. But we're going for cork bark, and we're going for, you know, the inside of buttress roots kind of thing, up on the forest floor. A little hole in there for frogs to go and just sort of hide away in a little bit. And of course we don't need to go to the bottom of the vivarium, because that's going to be the soil layer and more, so it doesn't have to go all the way down there. And equally, we're just going to feather it out on the next phase. Let's have a look. We're just going to feather it out here with a bit of silicone, not quite up to the edge, but you get the idea. We can put some, I put a little bit of stop of silicone in here, a little shallow area of substrate. We'll grow something over there. It's starting to transform. I really like this ledge. Again, it gives you more. It makes it obviously 3-dimensional, but it gives you something more for the animals to move around on it. It's another bit of surface, square footage if you like. Time now to get out of my reptile room and into a bigger room, because the silicone fumes off the silicone are blinding when they first come out. So I really can't stress enough, a top tip, work tidy. Get yourself a bin box, work tidy, keep your work area tidy. And keep tidying up as you go on. Wear gloves, wear old clothes, and just keep that sticky goo from getting absolutely everywhere. Keep everything tidy. You'll really enjoy it more if you do. Okay, for this next stage, we're in a bigger room, more air. Your substrate that you're going to adhere to the silicone, bone dry, or it won't stick properly. So remember, we've got a mix of coir fibre and dried sphagnum moss shredded. Plenty of kitchen roll. We're using brown silicone because then at least if there's any show through, it's brown and not clear. We sort of bluish clear as silicone is. Have plenty of gloves. Don't be afraid to change your gloves as and when you need them. And again, plenty of kitchen roll or whatever you want to use, blue roll, wool, to keep cleaning up. So this is the process. We're going to smear silicone on here. We're going to get this with a clean, dry hand. We're going to use one gloved hand to smear the silicone, pick that up, and we're going to sprinkle it on and pat it into all the nooks and crannies that we want to cover up. So let's crack on. Okay, so we've pretty much cleaned out all the loose substrate that didn't adhere. Put that back in the bucket. Now we're going to fit our drainage layer. We're going to use foam because it's lightweight, and we're going to see how it goes. Much lighter than anything else. Will it work? I think so. It's just got to be that false bottom to stop water pooling on the surface and going sour in the substrate, really. We'll give it a go. So I've gone for a fine 1-inch thick foam. It's fine. I'm not going to put a membrane because I'm thinking the foam, fineness of the pores in the foam, no different to a membrane. The substrate should sit on top, and I haven't gone all the way to the edge because I don't want to see this when I look into the finished product from either that side or this side. So we've got 1-inch false bottom. We'll see if that's enough. I think it will be because this is obviously only a small enclosure, and we don't want, 2 inches false bottom, 2 or 3 inches of soil. We're going to have nothing left. I think that'll do the job absolutely fine. A lightweight alternative to clay balls or gravel. Okay, background set. It hasn't, I'm lying, but for the purposes of this film, that glue's all gone off. It's all set. In this bucket, just here, we've got the substrate. Now we've got a substrate mix of coir peat, a little bit of coir husk. In that bucket full, 4 double scoops of clay pit sand or driveway kiln dried sand, fine sand, and probably in dry sphagnum moss, probably equal parts of the sand, 4 double handfuls mixed in there. So we've got a bit of fibrous material, a bit of sand. It's broken up substrate up, good drainage, and quite a bit of nutrients there, and quite a bit of stuff to rot down and become food for the microorganisms. They're going to inhabit this basically fully bioactive setup. So we're going to get that in gently, not to disturb too much the background. Okay, time for the planting. I'm going to pop up on the screen what they actually are when they're in there, about what's going to look good for you, and also what you've got. I've literally been to a garden centre, got some little cuttings here, got some small plants, got some £1 plants from Morrison's supermarket, for goodness sake. And the only bromeliad I could find isn't what I want, but it'll do for now. You want that little pool of water, don't you, for any kind of small frog in a tropical setup, I think, high or low. This is flowering, there's not going to be much water in there, but it'll do for now. Let's get on with planting, see what it turns out like. Another little tip, if you've got cable entry holes that fruit flies and things can crawl up and get out of, certainly put a bit of tape on the back as if needs be, to give the silicone something to rest against, and silicone that up, and then just get a Stanley knife and break the seal so you can still lift it up without it pulling away like that. So it's the next day. I've unfortunately been doing DIY in the bathroom, renovating our bathroom at home all day long. Bit cheesed off in my work clothes, just chucked an old jumper on, and we're out in the forest. And we're here because we're here. The dog's having a walk, our little grandbaby Lily's having a walk, and we are here to get some moss and some dead oak leaves and stuff to finish off setting up the enclosure. The good thing about wild taken moss and leaf litter is you're really seeding that bioactive setup. You're going to have springtails, bacteria, all kinds of good stuff in there. But of course, you could be bringing in harmful pathogens and all sorts. So you have to make that decision for yourselves. But we're going to go for living moss and dried and decaying leaf litter from the get-go here from the nearby forest where we live. We're going to take you back. I'm going to get that in. I'm going to use a razor blade to clean off any silicone from the glass. And I'm going to get this moss in, and I'm going to show you what the finished product looks like. Here we are, moss paradise.